Okay, so now we're going to start the second video for the second lecture. This one I'm going to divide into a couple of shorter videos because if I make a mistake in a long video, I have to go back to the whole beginning because it's really too hard to edit something in the middle. So we're going to start talking with the first of the endocrine organs, which is the hypothalamus. You look at the word and it tells you a lot about it. Hypo means under, thalamus means the thalamus. That's part of your brain that you learned from first semester. When we talk about the hypothalamus, the picture that you see in the upper left-hand corner is figure 18-6 on page 621. On my PowerPoints, whenever you see L, it means location. That way I don't have to write out the whole word. So when we talk about the hypothalamus in this part is what you have to write in, forms the lower walls and floor of the third ventricle. Just as a little review, when we say third ventricle, remember that's right in the middle of your brain. It's that hole that cerebral spinal fluid goes through. When you look at a mid-sagittal section of the brain, you can see that corpus callosum, which is kind of like that sideways C, that's neural fibers linking the two cerebral halves together. Underneath that, you see a hole. That hole is the third ventricle. So when we talk about the hypothalamus, it forms the lower walls and floor of that third ventricle. Here we go with another abbreviation that you should remember. F of X always means function, or what does it do? So when we talk about what is the function of the hypothalamus, it links the nervous system with the endocrine system. Again, it's going to link that nervous system, the brain and spinal cord, with the endocrine system. There's a unique feature that you need to remember about the hormones. Hormones are released in pulses, P-U-L-S-E-S. That means in a short burst. They are never released continuously. Again, because they are released in pulses, which means a set amount each time, it allows those hormones to build up slowly. Well, then how do you increase the amount of hormones? Easy. You increase the frequency of the pulses. For example, if let's say you secrete 5 cc's of ADH, you always secrete 5 cc's of ADH. But what if ADH is secreted 5 cc's every hour? If your body says, hey, we really need 10 cc's, you can't secrete 10 cc's. You have to secrete 2 5 cc pulses in an hour. So instead of releasing 1 5 cc pulse, you're going to release 2 5 cc pulses in an hour. And this again allows those hormones to build up slowly. Remember when we had our little chat about the types of intercellular junctions, when we talk about endocrine secretion, those chemical messengers called hormones are what are released, but the target cells have to have a receptor. So the hypothalamus forms the lower walls and floors of the third ventricle. It's going to link the nervous system with the endocrine system. Hormones are released in pulses. To increase the amount of hormone released, you just increase the frequency of the pulses, and any target cell is going to have a specific receptor for that hormone. Now we're going to talk about how those functions occur, the linkage of that nervous system with the endocrine system. There are 2 that are going to be listed on this page and 1 that are going to be listed on the next slide. In the hypothalamus, we have those neurosecretory cells. You can see them right here. The neurosecretory cells produce 2 hormones, ADH or antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. Again, the hypothalamus produces these hormones. That's why it's in bold-face print. Now those hormones are going to travel down the axon, but they're going to be released from the posterior pituitary. Posterior, new word, Pituitary, the posterior pituitary. Sometimes it's called the neurohypophysis, which is spelled Neurohypophysis, neurohypophysis or posterior pituitary. So what does that mean? Well, there's another important distinction. While the hypothalamus produces ADH and oxytocin, NB means nota bene in Latin, listen well. It means note, this is something you need to pay attention to, that the posterior pituitary secretes those hormones into the interstitial fluid and then the blood. So again, hypothalamus produces ADH and oxytocin, but the posterior pituitary secretes them. The second function is there are sympathetic neurons that are going to send impulses to the adrenal medulla. Here you can see your adrenal gland. Your adrenal gland, we'll be talking about it, sits on top of your kidneys. It's a triangular shaped organ. And you can see there are neurosecretory cells that are going to be sympathetic neurons that are going to send impulses to the adrenal medulla, medulla, which you know means the middle portion, and then it causes specific cells called chromaffin cells. Chromaffin cells is spelled CHROMAFFIN, chromaffin cells, to secrete epinephrine and norepinephrine. Epinephrine is spelled EPINEPHERINE. Norepinephrine, you just put NOR on the front of epinephrine. So we've seen two functions of the hypothalamus now. It produces ADH and oxytocin, but they're secreted from the posterior pituitary. And there are sympathetic neurons that are going to send impulses to the adrenal medulla that causes chromaffin cells to release epinephrine and norepinephrine. Remember that epinephrine and norepinephrine are the names that we prefer now for the use of adrenaline and noradrenaline. So the third function that the hypothalamus has is on this slide here. I wanted to explain to you the difference between the anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary. This is figure 18-5 on page 621. The reason I want to distinguish between that, because when you take a look at the lab objectives, you can see that you will have to distinguish between the anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary, and it's fairly easy to do. When we talk about histology, which you know means a tissue section, you can readily tell the difference between the posterior pituitary, which is called the neurohypophysis, and the anterior pituitary or adenohypophysis. How do you do it? Sorry, things a little off here. You think of their Latin names. So you look at the posterior pituitary. The posterior pituitary has neurohypophysis. Neuro, you think of neurons. So when you look at a cross-section of a posterior pituitary, it's going to be very lightly stained because you're going to see the axons, you're going to see fibers. Now, when you look at the adenohypophysis, adeno in Latin means gland, so they are going to function like glands, which means they're going to dump their contents into blood vessels. So the adenohypophysis is going to stain darker color. It's going to be more purple, and you're going to see a lot of cells. Please do not get into the bad habit of saying, oh, the posterior pituitary is going to be the back and the anterior pituitary is going to be the front. No, you'll have to explain your choice. And it's very simple. The posterior pituitary lobe is going to stain much lighter because what you're looking at are neurons. So you're going to see lightly colored stained axons. The adenohypophysis is going to have a lot of cells because those cells are going to be producing the hormones. And you're going to have a lot of blood vessels, so it's going to stain darker. caught up in the left and right, make sure that you look at what are the staining properties and that you look at the cells that you can see. Because just telling which it is not going to get you all the points. You have to explain why. So now we talk about that anterior pituitary or the adenohypophysis. Again, remember, adeno means glands. It's easy to remember. They're the ones that are going to secrete into interstitial fluid. Neurohypophysis, it has the neurons that are coming directly from the hypothalamus. Well, the hypothalamus is going to control the anterior pituitary because it's going to use releasing and inhibiting factors. Remember, we said it's going to be complex reflexes. You have one hormone that's secreted from the hypothalamus that acts on an organ that releases a second hormone. So that, pardon me, that first hormone is going to act on the anterior pituitary. And that's how it's going to control it. The hypothalamus controls the by using releasing and inhibiting factors. But how is it going to do it? Because endocrine organs always dump into interstitial fluid. If it's dumped into the interstitial fluid into the hypothalamus, that means that the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to be absorbed into the venous circulatory system, right? Interstitial fluid is going to go into the venous system and then go back to the heart. So it's going to be absorbed into the venous circulatory system. It's going to go to the heart. It's going to go back out from the heart to the arteries. And then from those arteries, it's going to go to the anterior pituitary. So if the hypothalamus dumped those hormones into interstitial fluid, it would have to go into the venous circulatory system to the heart, to the lungs. Don't forget the lungs are in there. It's going to come out of the lungs, and then it's going to go back out to the systemic circulation, and then to the anterior pituitary. So looking at that, that's going to take a relatively long time. And in taking that long time, you also are going to have the chance that you're going to degrade some of those hormones. They're going to be destroyed somehow. So there is a way that we're not going to lose those hormones and we're not going to take that long a time. So what we have to do is figure out how those hormones from the hypothalamus get directly to the anterior pituitary in a short time and without getting degraded or diluted. And again, don't forget the figure on this page is figure 18-5, page 621. They do so by this cute little diagram here. This diagram is in your textbook. It's figure 18-7 on page 622. When we talk about this system, it's called the hypophyseal portal system. Hypophyseal tells you it's going to go to the pituitary. A portal system is a unique system in that it's going to link blood vessels differently. When we talk about regular circulation, it always goes artery, arterial, capillary, venial, vein, back to the heart. This is going to be a unique system. When we talk about the hypophyseal portal system, it's a capillary to capillary connection. So we are going to talk later on about the hepatic portal system. Anytime you see a capillary to a capillary connection, it's called a portal system. The capillaries are fenestrated in both cases. Finestra in Latin means windows. So any fenestrated capillaries are going to have big pores in them so that big molecules can get in and out. Well, that makes sense because we're going to have hormones that are big molecules. So here you can see the portal vessels delivering the regulatory hormones to the capillary network in the anterior pituitary. Essentially then, what it does is it's going to avoid the systemic circulation. And in avoiding that systemic circulation, then it's a one-way circuit. It goes directly from the hypothalamus to the anterior pituitary. It doesn't have to go through the systemic circulation. It goes faster and it doesn't get diluted or degraded. So again, it's going to avoid the systemic circulation because it's a one-way circuit. That one-way circuit then makes it faster and the hormones don't get degraded or diluted. So bottom line, that hypophyseal portal system that joins two capillary beds that are fenestrated or have the bigger pores is the efficient ways for the hormones from the hypothalamus to travel directly to the anterior pituitary, and they don't, or it doesn't get degraded or diluted. Diluted is D-I-L-U-T-E-D. There is the hypophyseal vein. Normally when I have arrows to things, I'm very color coordinated. You can see here this arrow is, I don't know what that color you want to call it, purple. It goes with the purple writing. Now we have a blue arrow. It goes with the blue writing. So we have that hypophyseal vein. And when we talk about the hypophyseal vein, it drains both the anterior and posterior pituitary hormones, and then it's going to go to the heart, and then out and back. Now, it's going to drain the anterior, which its hormones are going to be in that portal system. The posterior pituitary hormones, though, remember, are going to be in that hypophyseal vein. So again, portal systems always have fenestrated capillaries, big pores. It's a one-way circuit in this case. That's going to avoid the systemic circulation so the hormones don't get diluted or degraded. And that's it. I thought there was another thing. So here's a typical pattern of regulation for multiple secretions of enzymes and hormones. This is figure 18-8. Can't read my writing. I think it's page 623. We're going to go over all these hormones later, so I just want to talk about this very briefly. When we talk about the anterior pituitary in the releasing and inhibiting hormones,